Hi, Captain. It's the first mate. It's Cal Trixie from the chat room. How are you?
How are you doing? Nancy, this is my unofficial, official first mate. She's got a show on Blog Talk Radio as well, and she does a wonderful job. Her whole network does a great job on jihad. So, first mate, go ahead and what's your question?
Oh, absolutely. First of all, Nancy, it's an honor to speak with you, and I'm just fascinated by the work, the great works that you are doing. I have a testimonial. I'll keep it very short, but then I do have my question, and then I'll hang up and let Nancy answer that. My story is my girlfriend. She was in a devastating car accident where half her face was removed. And she, of course, would leave her in a state of depression, and she had to undergo a series of reconstructive surgery operations, and they suggested that she visit a counselor because, of course, she was depressed. It's called situational depression. What happened is that when she went to apply for her gun permit, this was on her record, and I do not know for the life of me, first of all, how they would obtain her private medical records, but they did. She was diagnosed as being clinically depressed and therefore would be volatile, in which she should not be in possession of a firearm. Okay, that's my comment. That just made me, very, very ill. Now, my question is the Big Pharma. Now, I'm in Canada, and we had an expose about 2 months ago about doctors being wooed by Big Pharma, and that, hey, if you push this drug, we're going to send your family to the Bahamas for a week. And the doctors were doing this, and they got caught out here in Canada. Just listening to you, Nancy, speak about Big Pharma, what are we to do about that? And then I'm going to hang up and let you listen, and Captain, let you take the other call.
Oh, thanks.
Well, that is the big question, First Mate. That is the big question. So just to give you a little background here, in 2006, my fiancé, Jim Gottstein, was all over the front page of the New York Times. It was called the Zyprexa Papers. Jim got a hold of internal documents that Eli Lilly knew that they were killing children with the drug Zyprexa, and among other things. And Jim leaked these documents to the New York Times and about, I don't remember how many other people, and he was hauled into court, and he went up against the big giant, Eli Lilly. So you don't win in court with Big Pharma. Individuals don't win because in that case, the government recovered, I think it was $1.5 billion from Eli Lilly. But that is the cost of business for them. That's the cost of doing business. It's a mosquito bite. They just go on. Look at the sales of Zyprexa today. Look at the millions of children who are being put on, well, I don't know about millions, but hundreds, thousands of young children being put on this drug. And everyone,
what's the actual reason why they got to go, why these children have to go? What is their justification for putting that child on that drug? What their justification?
Again, Ken, it has to do with inconvenience.
Just because
the kid has to do with children needing parenting, children not getting enough attention, children having real fundamental physical causes of behavior, some things that are going wrong. I mean, delirium, all kinds. Your diet, eat too much sugar, drink too much caffeine. You know what happens. Most people do.
Right.
So it really comes down to a lot of witch hunting. This is so much like the Salem witch trials that it's just too. And I wrote about that in my article. I talked about spectral evidence. Once you get this popular notion, then about the boogeyman, and everybody today is fearful and confused, and it's for many people it's a quick answer, even if it's not true, is. And when you hear this from a doctor, oh, your child needs this. Most people go and think that doctors are going to tell them the truth. As you said earlier, these people take an oath, do no harm. So we go into people have their children, people work, they're trying to make ends meet. it's just a crazy world. And then you have a teacher who says, your child has ADHD, and if you don't do something about it, we're going to say that you are medically neglecting your child's needs, and then you've got DCF, and it's just a holy mess. But the first main question about what can you do, the first thing you can do, and each one of us can do, is learn about this. Go prepared. You've got the internet. And of course on television now there's all this stuff about, don't go on the internet. Well, do go on the internet and use critical thinking. Don't put your kids on these drugs. Refuse. But anyone who's listening to me, I have to say this is probably the most important thing I'm going to say on this show, to be honest with you. If any of your listeners, because 1 out of 4 women is on one of these drugs, 1 out of 5 men, never cold turkey. Yes, 1 out of 4 women, 1 out of 5 men, 1 out of 6 military. These drugs are not
90 million
safe.
Women. That's like 90 million women.
That's right. But don't ever cold turkey one of these drugs. Don't ever cold turkey. Go online and read about withdrawal. There's a site called Beyond Meds. There you can find honest information about withdrawal, but don't expect it from the medical profession. If they were honest about these drugs, they would not be selling them.
Well, twofold on one, what my first mate was talking about, and second, when you said about going cold turkey. Now, and we had touched on it briefly, and I've mentioned it before too. All of these, you look at all these school shootings and these mass shootings, every one of them was on Prozac or some kind of antidepressant drug, and then they said, okay, I'm fine. They get off of it, and then within a very short time, that's when like women, they'll drown their children in the bathtub. They'll go on a mass shooting. Their brain it does not know how to function because they've had this drug that the brain was functioning on this drug. And once a drug is off, now the brain doesn't know how to function on its own, and it just blows up. Now,
that's exactly right, but there's another dangerous time, too. The 2 dangerous times are starting the drug, 3, starting the drug, going up in a dosage, or stopping.
Well, what does the starting do?
This is a toxic drug. These are toxic drugs. There's no such thing as a chemical imbalance. So you're taking a drug that creates a chemical imbalance.
I agree.
And we don't understand the motto of neuroscience. We act like we know all this stuff about the brain, but in reality, the motto of neuroscience is the more we learn about the brain, the less we know.
Right. Absolutely.
I know that's not very comforting to people, but so these drugs are and at the same time, the reality is that these drugs are not going to go away. You don't get to take chemicals back. I mean, if you look at the past, we know that this is true. But we have to be, and it's also not fair to say that these drugs don't help anyone in any way, because that's just not true.
Well, I'm sure
But it has to be. It's responsible. It needs to be very short term. None of these drugs were ever studied beyond 6 or 8 weeks, ever.
Well,
people are being told to take them for the rest of their lives.
Right.
But let me just wrap up what the first mate said. What can you do? The first and foremost thing is that the drug companies can only exist because we buy the drugs, and that's the bottom line. But beyond that, we have to stop electing people who take drug money.
Right. Absolutely, 100%. And unfortunately, it's damn near all of them. And that's the problem. You need to get people that won't take it. And it's hard to get, even if you don't take it when you come in, but you get reelected, you don't get reelected unless you're corrupt. You cannot possibly, you might get elected for not being corrupt, but you can't get reelected if you're not corrupt. That's the unfortunate thing.
And in our celebrity culture today, another thing you can do is give them hell when these celebrities from Hollywood tout the drugs. Because in the UK, it's a whole different story. Celebrities in the United Kingdom are coming out, and like Stevie Nicks and Sinead O'Connor and all kinds of people who, talking about the reality that these drugs are a disaster and that mental illness is fraudulent. and when I say that, I don't mean that people don't experience altered states or extreme emotional distress. That's real. But
sure,
the idea that these are illnesses that we know about, that these are diseases, and that these drugs help people is they're management tools. They are sedatives. They are horse tranquilizers and stimulants. That's what they are.
Well, I worked with and I'm an actor, and I worked with a lady that was in a show with me, and we were talking about these antidepressant drugs, and I was telling her about how my opinions on them, and we were talking about a mass shooting at one point, and this was a number of years ago, and I was explaining that to her, and then she came out and she says, well, I'm on antidepressant drugs, and you have to take them. Once you get on them, you have to take them for the rest of your life. And I was like, that's just insane. Once your brain gets on these drugs, you're right, you have to whittle it off, but how do you do that? I don't know. But getting back to what First Mate was talking about here, there's a certain criteria, and I was going to cover the article before you called in, but there's a certain criteria that the psychiatrists, the ACA or whatever the hell that is, American APA, if you disagree with the government and you're on the internet a lot and you post make a post. I'm trying to explain myself and I'm losing it, but the posts that are what people would consider anti-government, okay, they consider that a mental illness because you criticize the government. Therefore, you are not allowed to have a gun. If you're on the internet, and you were right, if you're on the internet a lot and you talk with your friends, they can consider that mentally ill, and you are not allowed.
Oppositional defiance disorder.
Yeah.
Oppositional defiance disorder. There are at least 12 diagnoses for every man, woman, and child.
They call that political paranoia. So if you made a comment about what was going on in the Bundy Ranch there in Nevada, you would be considered having to have political paranoia. Therefore, they can look on your Facebook account and see that you posted a number of posts that had to deal with what was happening in the Bundy Ranch, and you were for Cliven Bundy. Well, that means that you're politically paranoid, you've got a mental illness, therefore your guns now, you can't even get a gun, but now you have to get your guns confiscated. So they're going to come to your door, and they're going to, without a warrant, come into your home, search your home, they find anything that they don't like, and they just take it. And this is not hyperbole. This is actual physical. This is real.
Yes, it is real. People have once your foot gets dragged into the mental health system, you can expect that your door can be broken down and you can be whisked away, and no one will even have any idea what happened to you. We're talking about KGB kind of stuff. This is what it is, and
exactly.
I want to make it clear that I'm not a gun fan, but the reason that I could not support any of the gun legislation is because we saw this was in big, bold red writing the whole time for us. The second it was suggested that based on a psychiatric diagnosis, which is totally non-science, it's completely subjective on the part of any mental health professional who happens to see that person, and in the eyes of psychiatry, everything is a mental illness, and for that to be involved in the decision over whether or not someone's constitutional rights are interfered with, I found myself watching everything and saying, I want to be a part of solutions for less violence. I want to be a part of, some kind of gun control. But this is not it. This is seriously unconstitutional.
Well, this is what they claim. They claim 1 in 6 Americans have what you call a diagnosable anxiety disorder. Now, first of all, that number is just absolutely ridiculous. If you've got this attention deficit stupid disorder because your teacher is boring and she's not covering or he's not covering, they're not very good teachers, so you're going to lose your mind. You're not going to pay attention. Okay, you've got a mental illness. Like you said, if you're grieving, let's say your mother or your brother or your son. Now, how many mothers and how many fathers out there, when they lose a child, Okay, I'm going to tell you something right now. They're going to grieve for a hell of a lot more than 2 weeks. They're going to grieve for a hell of a lot more than 2 years. I'm sorry, you lose a child, especially in a very traumatic way.
I lost my first child at 4.5 months old. And she's with me every day of my life. This
Absolutely.
is insanity. If you're Jewish, if you're Jewish, this is your religion is now a mental illness because there's a tradition called sitting shiva after the death of a loved one, and that goes on for a year. So that's a mental illness. Yeah. Because
you're sitting on a box and you're grieving. And
but here, let me give you a statistic because this one blows my mind. Okay. Americans consume 50% of all psychiatric drugs, 50%, but we make up 5% of the demographic. So 5% of the people consume 50% of the psychiatric drugs.
Whoa! Whoa! Slow silver down, Kimosabe. That's a ridiculous number here. Wait a minute.
That's right. That's why there are articles in Europe there are all these articles about America's insane. By definition, we're consuming all these psychiatric drugs.
Well, then that would mean that these people are not only on just one drug, they have to be on multiple drugs. Is that true?
Well, what happens is you go on the drug and you have a side effect, and then the doctor says, oh, no, and here's a drug for that. That's how it works. Starts with one drug.
I missed the last caller, and they hung up, and then they looked at me
called
back.
Let's
I don't want to. I'm sorry about that. I did not mean to ignore you. I wasn't ignoring you. The discussion was getting going. So if your last number is 1659, you are now on with the captain. How are you doing this morning?
Hi, Captain. It's Raquel.
Hey, Raquel. Raquel Okyay.
Hey.
How you doing?
Hi, Raquel.
Hi. How are you?
This is Nancy.
Good. I kind of wanted to talk about my article about Benghazi.
Well,
or you just want to stick to Justina?
Yeah, we're sticking on the American Psychiatric Association today.
Okay.
However, tomorrow I'm going to be hitting Benghazi. You're more than welcome to come on and talk about that. And since you're on here, you've written several articles with Justina. Do you have a new article that's coming out? Do you have any new information?
Yes, I am working on something right now as a follow-up, just to kind of update people. And I know your other caller or your other person on the show went into detail a little bit. I was listening about that meeting today, so that's kind of important with the Commissioner, Polanowitz. With Reverend Mahoney, and I know that that's going to be important. I have been in touch with Liberty Counsel attorney Matt Staver. He said he's doing an op-ed piece this week concerning all of these issues. I heard that the former DCF Commissioner Roche, that she was hired. She was hired as an assistant to the new DCF. Or the interim one right now, like she's rehired at $130,000 a year.
I thought it was $137,000, but maybe you're right, Raquel. Yes,
maybe
it's
you're
outrageous.
Right. You could be right. It could be $137,000, yeah.
Who cares?
Let me just for a second. I just want to thank you, Raquel. I've really enjoyed your articles, and it's really an honor to meet you.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Thank you. It's a sad topic, rather, and it's really important that people become aware of what is happening to our kids, because it's not just Justina. And I wanted to mention, since we're talking about her, I had a family reach out to me after they read my article, and they were down here in Florida as well. So she said she had her own story to tell, and I invited her over. And it was just so sad. I just can't get her out of my head. And it's sort of a similar situation. Well, a little bit similar. Her son is autistic and was having some violent episodes. That she and her mom, grandma came over too. Her and her mom, basically dealt with it the best they can. They had ways to control him. But they said that these were outbursts that happened, but they're parents and they love their child, and you deal with it. I mean, life isn't easy. But so they had to call the cops one night because he had been a little bit more rough than usual. And of course they call in DCF and they take the kid. So they get into a 5-year. They're still in a 5-year battle to get their poor son back, who now is in a psychiatric. Doesn't get very very similar to Justina, a home for teens. Like a home, and he's on drugs. He's heavily sedated. He doesn't get any education, any real education. He's been sexually abused a couple of times. Nobody has been charged with that abuse, even though she's pointed it out and so on. This is really crazy, and I can't. And I looked at them. They have really well documented. This is for real. What's going on? But what happened was, after the boy was first sexually molested, the DCF deemed him like a sexual deviant, and they had him on a treatment that they're forcing him to masturbate for 45 minutes a day. And I'm like thinking, what? And she's like, yes. And I said, and the judge, they get, like, it just dumbfounded me. I can't imagine something like that for any psychiatric care for a teenager. He's now 17, and she's just waiting for him to turn 18 so that she can go and pick him up finally. And now they're talking about institutionalizing him because they want to keep him in their care. They're not taking care of him now.
Raquel, let me ask you something.
And Florida is a pretty scary place.
It is.
Yeah.
For kids,
well,
it is. Yeah.
Raquel, I wanted to ask you something. You said that they this kid, this teenager, because he was sexually molested. Are you trying to say that they are claiming that he instigated this molestation of sorts?
Yes, they are. They did, and they probably did the same thing to I think the first incident of molestation was another boy. He was only 11 years old. He had never any problems before that, except for his autism. Had these short, violent episodes. But the mom said that all the rest of the time he's just a sweet kid. And every time they put him in a new school, they explained what was going on. They met with the principal. They were doing everything. And in fact, she said she did have him on medication, and she felt that the course that they were taking was good for him. He was doing really well, And then once they took him, he just went downhill ever since. And up until this day, she gets her twice a month visit for an hour supervised. And he's not allowed to talk to her really, without, he gets in trouble for telling her stuff. So he tries to tell her stuff on the side. And basically all he keeps saying is, Mom, when am I going home? This is 5 years.
Yeah.
If
people aren't seething, if this is happening in every single state. Every single state. This is what's happening. It's just, I don't even know what to say. It's so sick and so disturbing, and we have to stop this. We have to stop this. And the thing is, Raquel, you might be familiar with Nancy Schaefer, was the senator for congressperson from Atlanta, and she exposed this in great detail. And she and her, then all of a sudden one day, supposedly there was this double murder-suicide. Nobody believes it. Yeah. No one believes it. There's no investigation. When I tried to investigate it, I could find nothing.
That type of suicide is so rare, and it would just be, it's incredulous. It just wouldn't happen. That they were a happily married couple for many, many years. They had, 4 or 5 kids, 9 or 10 grandchildren. That's obviously, they killed her. They killed her for exposing CPS. That's how big CPS is, because she was on the pulse of the problem in Georgia. And first they put a lot of money into taking her out, as a state senator in a primary, because she was a Republican. And then after that, then they came down on her because she didn't stop. They wanted to shut her up. She didn't stop, and they killed her for it. It's true. the Department of Children and Families is the most criminal organization in the country. And until people start speaking out about it, recognizing it, accepting it as the truth, we have to keep the awareness campaign up. I do have a little good news. I do have a contact. Her name is Jamie Hope. She's a writer. She's a friend of mine on Facebook, and she reached out to me about Justina because she said that she did she was working for a a U.S. congressman, probably she said about 15 years ago, and they were also, exposing the CPS thing, and she says she has so much information for me. So we just talked about it over the weekend. So we're definitely going to collaborate. And I also put her in touch with my editor at Human Events. So I want to have her. So what we want to do is, we were talking about this Saturday, we're going to do dual articles. So I'm going to hit up social services, and she's going to hit up the education side, because what she said they're trying to do is they're really hitting up the 0 to 5. They say, they're trying to present, and it's sort of UN, ideas. It's a UN sort of wants this too. They want kids in school from birth. They want to know. They want to make sure that your kid is your newborn. By the way, your newborn is psychologically, well. They want to test psych. They want to test. They want to make sure they're in school. They want to force this education, public education, on 0 to 5. I saw the documentation. She emailed it to me. So what she wants to do is start exposing them from the education angle, and I'm going to stick to the social services. So, I think that's something positive. It's just one more person telling the same story, and the more people tell that story, the more credible it becomes. So I keep posting about it on my Facebook page, and what happens is I get some of my friends who are, pretty politically savvy, or know people and are into politics, and they say, what do you mean, Raquel? I never heard of that. And then that's my open door. Well, let me tell you something. You know me. I'm not here to BS you. I'm here because I'm telling you, I know this is going on. This is horrible. I've seen the parents. I've seen them crying. They've cried on my shoulders. I lose sleep at night thinking about this kind of stuff. The American people have to realize that every child in our country has a bounty on their head. In fact, I'm going to quote a former guardian ad litem in the state of Florida, because she told me this. She said, each child in the state of Florida has a bounty on their head. I mean, that is just the sickest thing. So now meanwhile, let me just share with you, a lot of these parents that I've talked to and interviewed, well, they've contacted their local reps. They've contacted the governor. They've contacted Pam Bondi. They've contacted everybody. There's got to be hundreds of parents so desperate. They'll call everybody. They'll do anything, okay? Mm-hmm. And nobody, not one of them has the guts to do something. They even barely, they don't. Sometimes they're either ignored, or they're just, no, that's the Department of Children and Families.
Well, look at Massachusetts, Raquel. Look at Massachusetts. I'm a Democrat. I'm so ashamed. Not a single Democrat has said a bloody word about Justina Pelletier, who's been tortured for over 15 months now. Yes, but you know what? I want to turn this conversation just a little bit, because I want to talk about the House bill, this bill that Steve Stockman and Raquel, I'm sure that you can talk about this too. The House bill.
Yep.
Because what can we do about this? What can we do about this? We can push this bill.
Well, the way to push the bill is to contact your representative in Congress. That's really, when they start getting calls, that's when they start moving. You got to light a match under their butts.
But let's explain to the listeners what this bill is. This is a bill that's been introduced by Texas Representative Steve Stockman, a Republican in the 36th District of Texas, and it seeks. I'm looking for. I can't see it right here, but basically what it does is it seeks to strip funding from. Okay.
Well, I've got it right here. Let me read it here real quick.
Okay, good.
The Department of Health and Human Services shall withhold all monies from state agencies or entities hospitals, and medical facilities that, 1, allow research presenting greater than minimal risk to minors, juveniles, or wards of the state, which Justina is a ward of the state. 2, deny 14th Amendment rights to the parents or child. Or 3, investigate parents or charge them with medical neglect, like they did with Justina, or remove children from the parents' custody when in disagreement with a subjective diagnosis involving psychotropic drugs. Now that right there, you have to put this down on paper to say this is common sense stuff. This is stuff that this should go understood. You should not even get to this point unless you need psychological help. You know what I'm saying? But that's what that is. I mean, you're right. This does not have a chance in hell to pass. But if everybody's together and they call and they harass their representative, I mean, be a thorn in their freaking side every single day. If you got to write 2 or 3 letters a day, so be it. Do it. Be a.
When I said that this doesn't have a chance, an iceberg's chance in hell, I have to amend that, because if every person, one man, one vote, one person, one vote, we still have that in this country. We don't use it, but if all of your listeners just said to themselves, you know what, I have to do this. I have to do this for my children, for my grandchildren, for the future generations of this country, for the country that I love, and for the idea of freedom that is the basis of why people have come to this country over the last 300 years. If this is my responsibility to do this, if I go to my legislator and I say, I want to know exactly why you are not going to sign, why you're not going to co-sponsor this bill, because I'm going to campaign. We can do this. We can do this. People can do this. I'll tell you, I've met so many incredible people through the Justina campaign. I'm thinking of a woman named Allie Burnett in Ohio who's dying of a disease called mastocytosis, who just has done so much for the Justina. And this woman can't even pretty much leave her home. Or there's a woman named Sarah Marie Scott in North Carolina who's got a special needs child and has to fight with the authorities constantly over every little step that she takes. And this woman has created people are working together, and I think of Sarah Marie Scott, a young mother, saying to me, I've never done anything like this before. I can't do this. And she did. She does. People do. Amy Philo, this is an amazing woman. Actually, her name is Amy James right now. She's a recent law grad in Texas. She discovered that 13 million. She had an experience herself where she gave birth to a child, and she was drugged for postpartum depression right afterwards, and started having homicidal ideation. This is very, very common. They started telling her, oh, you have a mental illness, blah, this and that, and she said, whoa, doggy, and she didn't go with it. And afterwards, that politicized her, and she and her former husband documented the $13 million that the pharmaceutical industry spent on both sides of the aisle to buy something called the Mothers Act, which is in the Affordable Care Act.
Oh, great.
And it provides ample funding for the drugging of mothers on every side of the birth cycle. Amy, and to be honest with you, Amy was the person who inspired me back in 2008, because when I started discovering all of this, I had the same reaction that Ken said earlier. How do you do this? Too much. What do you do? And I saw what Amy was doing, and I got on board with that. And I think that, Ken, you also wanted to talk about Teen Screen, because Amy, continue. I mean, anyone can make a difference. But,
yeah, and what else? That bill also, isn't signed into stone. So it's something that can be negotiated in Congress, because the problem with I love any bill that says stop funding, actually, but the problem with doing that is that, state governments, they will fall. And they're not going to do that. They're not going to stop the funding because they are hungry and desperate for the money. For instance, in the state of Florida, 40% of its budget comes from social services, because all this money comes from social services, human health resources, and then through social services. So that's 40% of Florida's budget. Now let's imagine that they're cut off. Well, they're going to have to hire.
Well, your governor would be very upset, wouldn't he? Because your governor made a fortune on social services.
Oh, absolutely. Governor Scott has his money invested into the drug testing facilities. And guess what? Every time a child is taken into DCF cares, well, the parents are drug tested, whether drugs are involved or not. So they got a whole bunch of parents, being drugged, and Scott owns these places. It's
That's
like,
right.
It's ridiculous, And then the other thing is that, they're like the war on drugs, and then the first thing they do is drug the kid, because they have to calm the kid down, because the kid is so upset being torn apart from such psychological problems with being torn apart from a family who loves you.
Oh, the stories are incredible. I mean, one woman was telling me about how her kindergartner went to school, first day of school, gets taken aside and said, well, what do you need in case you never see your mommy again? And this kid was whisked out. Can you imagine what the trauma to that child? I mean, it is. We have got to pull together and put our politics aside and put the kids first and put our families first and just absolutely stop. And yeah.
Well, let me interject
together, because
real quick.
It is not a political. The Democrats, the Republicans, they're all doing it. It's not political, because it doesn't matter. It's all about the dollars and the greediness. And then that they've been getting away with it for so long, of course they become very sloppy, and they also become very arrogant. So they just go on doing whatever they want because they keep getting away with it. And I think, I'm so embarrassed at the politicians who sit back. They know what's going on. They have to, because they're the ones getting the complaints from the parents, and they do absolutely nothing. Like I don't know, if I was a representative anywhere and a bunch of parents start calling me up, let me look into this, right? But no, these people don't. But I think a lot of times they're threatened. It's really insane, sick.
What is the excuse of Elizabeth Warren? What is the excuse of Elizabeth Warren in Massachusetts?
She's an idiot.
The senator for fighting for kids in student debt. Well, you know what? Our kids aren't going to have student debt because they're never going to go to school if they're drugged. And this. And Justina Pelletier is in her state, and I'd like to see Elizabeth Warren step up and at least make a comment.
I want to get back here real quick. My mom taught a school for a number of years with the special ed. And a lot of these kids were, when they came into class, they were born drug addicts because their parents were heroin addicts and they were cocaine addicts and blah, 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 blah. And when the children are born, they don't know, but they are addicted to the heroin, the drugs, and whatever the mother takes in the drug. And, of course, if the mother's pregnant, that comes in with the baby. Now, what I'm trying to say, and, of course, there was a lot of problems with these kids. But when you were talking about the postpartum depression and they immediately put these mothers on this postpartum depression, my question is, now, if that child is being breastfed, what is the effect of those postpartum depression drugs to that child? Does it have an effect? Will it turn that kid?
Oh, yes. And there are birth defects.
So
I remember in Atlanta, Georgia.
They're drugging the child. By drugging the mother, they're drugging the child. Well, I mean, if they know this, why are they allowed to do it? That doesn't even make any sense to me.